Welcome back to everyone, and a big welcome to Marco Macoratti, Sales and Sustainability Officer, and Stefan Hilss, CEO of Linked. So welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for joining us. We just heard some really interesting facts around authentication. We looked at different ways in which connected packaging is being used, and actually how innovation and technology is really helping to eradicate a large problem, of course, which is counterfeits. But today, now with us, we're going to be talking about packaging transformed, envisioning the future of connected packaging, and looking again into technology innovations and how that is moving forward. But before we get there, I always like to just hear a little bit about our speakers, so we get to know you a little bit before we dive into the raw stuff. So Marco and Stefan, I'm going to ask you to give me an interesting fact. So Marco's laughing, so that means that you're going to go first. An interesting fact that not many people know about you, Marco. Give it a go.
In a living. It's amazing because there are only 50,000 people and 30 million tourists every year coming to visit the city.
Okay, alrighty. Stefan, have you got an interesting fact about you or anything else?
Yeah, I'll just pick up on our warm-up session here because we obviously had, as you can tell, we have a slightly aligned outfit.
Well, I've also got blue on as well. So blue is the code for today.
We were wondering how you would show up here, but the two of us aligned. We said we're gonna have to wear something that really makes it fancy, right? So at least if it's not a content, people will remember the dress code. So no. I'm wearing this shirt which I call the Linked shirt. So it has something to do with Linked. It's not just my personal taste. I told Marco the story. I'll spare you with the story. But we decided it's a cool shirt, so now we both aligned on that. So over to you now.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. So let's just start with trends. You know, we're looking at the future, but let's look at some of the trends that you're seeing at the moment. Stefan, I'll stay with you for now. What are the trends that you're seeing? What are you observing in the field of connected packaging at the moment?
It's a very generic topic, of course. It has a lot of different facets, how it is actually now being exercised, tested, deployed. And the use cases, as we all know, are more than one. And that makes it so interesting because it is a universal technology that can solve a lot of topics. Hence, there is not that one single answer for the typical inquiry that pops up. We typically really have to go into a discussion to find out what is the primary objective, perhaps the secondary objective. Sometimes it's more than that. And the thing is, it's still a field of experimentation because it is mainly driven today, for the majority of our business, FMCG, by individuals that want to experiment something, typically from the marketing side, of course. But I think as much as we can see now, slowly regulatory coming into the field, we're seeing this overlap of two major drivers, one being the marketing side wanting to enhance the customer experience. On the other hand, we see regulatory understanding that connected packaging can actually, be the vehicle for their objectives. I just name, digital passports and stuff like that, which certainly you cannot fulfill if you are stuck to the physical pack and whatever the physical pack can carry as a piece of information. So that's a second element coming in. And then a third one, which is anti-counterfeiting, which always has been there, that chips in occasionally wherever that is a major concern, but it's sort of like also piggybacking onto something that potentially is a discussion already ongoing. So I think those three angles are typically the lanes through which a plane lands into this connected packaging airport, and people meet there and talk to each other and find out, oh, okay, similar interests, or different interests, but similar technology. And so I think that's what really makes the whole subject so interesting, because there's so many dimensions to it, which can be, if done well, answer more than one request or one issue, and therefore is powerful.
Yeah, definitely. There's a couple of good points there. Mark, I don't know if you want to pick up on anything, or if there was any other trends or trends that you're seeing at the moment in connected packaging.
I mean, I can only add on Stefan points that there is a demand for data. Data is so important, not only in order to shift the linear economy to circular economy, because with the weight of data, you can start to bend the linear economy to a circular one. So they are hungry for data, but they're not actually very open to share data. So there is a kind of a dilemma. I would like to know more, but I would like to share less, which is a cultural problem that we have, but it's going to change. It's going to change because somebody will start to do that and all other would follow. And the second is, we were always talking in the industry about customer-centric approaches. Now we're talking about consumer-centric approach. This is, I think, something that is shifting the whole paradigm of how we do business. We have so much, we need to be so much focused on our consumers. The consumer have the power of spending. Yeah. And because of the limited power of spending that we are facing now, unfortunately, in these times, okay, there is a need to really address what these consumers really want. And so I see these two trends, data and consumer. Get the two things together. And when you combine the consumer data and share it along the industry, you start to create value that is coming back to consumer. And who is doing this will have a strong competitive advantage compared to others that are still waiting and seeing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think data is a huge piece there. Consumers don't want to share their own data, but they want to know more. So I see what you're talking about there as well, which is, a bit of a challenge, I suppose, as well. What do you think around challenges or barriers? As you say, there's some brands who are kind of sitting back and waiting to see what other people are doing. Why are they doing that? What are the barriers? What are the challenges?
The market dynamic has completely shifted. I mean, with the use of technology, the packaging has been commoditized until a few years ago. Nobody was actually thinking about the packaging as more as a commodity. So lighter, cheaper, and more performing. Now, as I said, with the consumer empowerment, there is a totally different dynamics that needs to be actually addressed. I mean, and say, so what are these approximately 10 billion people actually asking for? Because they're compromising between convenience, affordability, and sustainability. It's the same thing we do when we go out and shopping. We decide on what to buy, keeping in mind what is the sustainability DNA of what we are buying, not only the product, but also the packaging. And so these pose a totally new challenge. It's a challenge, especially for marketing. Marketing that has been so much focused on creating products that are customized to individual needs.
What about
think about fashion? Yeah. So see how many fashion, or go to the US in a grocery aisle. I mean, there is no one sort of bread. There are 20 different bread choices. Now, now changing that into something that is actually sustainability related is going to be extremely difficult for them. I mean, the technology is actually there, but as I mentioned before, is a question as if we use technology to collect and share data, who will be collecting, who will be sharing? And this is, I think, the first challenge that needs to be overcome. This cultural shift that is basically, I'm not doing any transactional activity between me, upstream and downstream. I'm thinking collectively. I mean, I'm working collectively. And this is a very difficult point that will shift, I believe, very, very quick, because circular economy, sustainability needs to have a collaborative approach.
What do you think, Stefan, in terms of like the barriers and the challenges? Why are some of these brands not diving into it? We saw a lot are. In fact, in the first session, we talked about 88% are going to do it in 2024. But what about that other 20-odd%? Why are they not getting involved?
Probably ask the wrong guy, but it's a guess, of course. And of course, this industry is far from being led by 1 or 2 or 3 major players. It's a very fragmented industry. So we have micro decisions being taken in hundreds of boardrooms and brains of people, individuals, which in the end of the day have to buy the story and has to fit into their current setup and their company culture and God knows what. There are many other parameters that play into a decision. Even if somebody is deciding it's the right thing to do, sometimes people don't do it for other reasons, not because they're not aware of it, or not because they are in disagreement. So I would be careful to make that judgment call based on, these guys don't get it. Certainly, it's all over the place, and we are all in the moment, not only just professional people doing our job, but we're also consumers. So we recognize this epic change in our everyday life. It is not a phenomenon we're talking in a bubble, in the B2B bubble, so to say, but we're talking about this as individuals going shopping every day, and obviously recognizing, if we're honest, that our behavior has changed. I mean, it changes not from one day to another, but it changes gradually year on year. And building into what we just talked about, that means, yes, that commodity of packaging. There was once just sort of like a protective layer that had a decorative side, which somehow, advertised the product and its properties and its whatever. That was the job of packaging the last 45 years, to make the point of sale on the supermarket shelf function and work. That was the primary job. And this connected packaging story, obviously, and this is where I was talking about in other sessions before, changes the value proposition of packaging. Because packaging, the printed packaging, is the bridge point from which you then take that helicopter into the digital space. So it's that unavoidable bridge point that people always have an access to, whether they like it or not, but the physical pack is with them. And that bridge point is a very powerful value proposition. I mean, yes, you can decorate it, you make it nice, you protect the product, all that stays. And there will be still lots of sales going on some shelves, in some supermarkets, on a gas station, impulse moments, whatever, where we don't make a plan, where packaging dresses the product, and a good dress sells the product. That all stays. But the value proposition that comes on top is the connected pack, and the bridge point that links us into the connected space is something that the packaging uniquely carries. So this is a change that this pack actually does more than just make that moment of sale, decorate the pack, illustrate the brand values, make it look nice, whatever. This is more. And I think that changes, again, what we think of, or what we have to consider when we're talking about packaging decoration. And ultimately, yes, there are big stories like sustainability or those things which recyclability, the ability to go into a circular economy, all those things require an ecosystem approach. So it's not anymore that linear bridge between, let's say, the producer which decorates a pack and the consumer which buys it, and then that's the only story told. And because of that, we need to elevate it out of this micromanagement into this macro picture, where it then becomes relevant for more than one use case. So connected packaging just means it is always able to stay in touch. And that's powerful. That's changing a linear analog thing into something highly dynamic, fluid, that goes on and lives on over the different phases of the life cycle.
Let me add on this. Americans usually say, don't tell a book by its cover. But in this case, the cover is becoming so much informative that is connecting the people to insights that they didn't get the opportunity to do this. So the Generation Z, which is actually driving this change, they're hyper connected. They need to have this information. They understand the functionality of packaging and what is the role of protecting and the shelf life and everything. But now they want they speak through the packaging and to understand, are the company doing more and better? Are they doing responsible business? And are they thinking about me when I consume? Because the consumption is not any more than I buy something that I love. I want to love how to consume the thing. So it's about what they're going to do with the packaging at the end of the consumer journey. Yeah. So there is so much information that needs to be exchanged. And as I said, who will do this first will definitely win consumer loyalty.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's really interesting. And I think that brings us to something we can ask the audience, a poll. Which potential benefit of connected packaging excites you the most? As a consumer, is it about enhanced consumer engagement, which obviously, Stefan, you were talking about as well, improved supply chain visibility? Marco, you're talking to that alongside the sustainability initiatives. And then, of course, we've just heard from product authentication and security. So let's see what the audience say. What is their what is their excitement level when we talk about these? I'll just give it another second. All right, let's end the poll there. Okay, so interestingly, it is consumer engagement. So almost 50% are talking about consumer engagement, enhanced consumer engagement. Improved supply chain visibility is coming in at 20%, and then sustainability and product authentication are coming in later on there as well at 17. So sustainability and product authentication, I would say, as number 3. Improved supply chain visibility is number 2. But enhanced consumer engagement, which, you know, that's really interesting, especially for appetite creator. But I think that's interesting. I think that comes to, you know, in terms of being able to connect with the consumer, it's actually bringing the consumer something that they're enjoying and being interacted with. I think that's really interesting in terms of being able to really think about that kind of marketing opportunity. I don't know, Marco, if you've got something to add to that.
Answers here, yes, it is necessary to have more enhanced consumer engagement. But what is the enhancement about? And with the other 3 answers, I can see that all 3 answers are equally valued.
Yes.
And so it could be the supply chain, it could be the sustainability initiative, or something else.
Yes.
So I think it's a very interesting pool that you pulled out here.
Yeah, I think enhanced consumer engagement is that a marketing initiative, is that a loyalty program as well. You know, there's all those options open to being able to do some sort of gamification, augmented reality. Stefan, what are you thinking in terms of enhanced consumer engagement?
I think, look, in the end, of course, the consumer always likes to be emotionally touched. And whatever we've done with packaging the past 25 years was not to put a Helvetica text on and say, this is the content, this is the ingredients, this is the whatever else. Yeah, we never did that. Why did we not do this? Why did we use 8, 9, 10, 12 colors to print information that any sensible person can read in black and white? Much better even. We did this because we emotionalized something. And it is only because of that, of course, I'm not surprised at the reaction that people, when it comes to consumer engagement, that's the softer part. Engagement always sounds like, you know, I get something in return, immediate, instant gratification, something that gives something back. And of course, in the meantime, I give something too. And this is, of course, the data part. But it's that you know, that gut part that makes people engage and gives them something like an instant feedback, something they like, something that puts a smile on their face. That is the emotional experience that people are happy to engage with. If you tell them you have to scan this, then you have to read something in black and white text on a table that is made in Excel, but now on a website, of course, it's not going to create any emotional feedback that you say, oh, let's do this again next time. They'll do this and say, what is this? What a waste of time. Just gone.
Yeah, which is the same as people who send QR codes just to their website, might I add.
Exactly. Which again, it's the engagement means it's instant satisfaction, instant gratification. And this is the Generation Z that Marco mentioned. Yes, this is a pattern that they've gotten used to. So I want to get something, I'm linking in and I get something immediately that makes me feel better. I get, in the best of cases, 2 thumbs up, and I get all this gratification that engages me to do it again. And I think this is the pattern that is not, you know, it's not unique to connected packaging, but it's as valid to connected packaging and its value proposition than any other channel trying to attract attention.
Yeah. No, it is a bilateral communication, basically. No, you provide information, but you collect information. That information is so rich and so unique. In the moment that you can start to segment, then you can start the different location, the different ages, the different spending power, the different decisions, the different interests, the different feedback. There is so much that could be collected out by engaging the consumer and saying, so what are the things that you would like to know about what are you consuming today? And sharing that information then with the whole value stream upstream is becoming a very, it's a golden nuggets, I will call it. Because you start to align all the partners in the value chain upstreams to say, this is what we need to provide. Maybe differently between Europe and the US, but definitely you start winning the attention and the loyalty of consumer because they start to speak my language. And considering that the Generation Z is so used to communicate through the telephone, that is so a unique opportunity today to leverage from the brands, retailer, packaging, but also collector, recycler, all people, all stakeholders that are part of what will be the future circular economy. Because this information, what consumers are doing, is not available upstream. They know what is the need from the information is filtered over the time, has been filtered. And now providing this information, everybody will come up with true innovation in the way we could do business.
Absolutely. And I think you have that option as well to ask people as well. Not necessarily what do you want to see here, but you put some things there and you see what people interact with, and you start to understand, okay, the consumers really like this when we put this game, and when we put this boring Excel table, nobody interacted with it. Surprise. So I think is there opportunity there to be able to learn what they want, because obviously we're tracking everything that is happening on that interaction. I've got some interesting comments actually from the audience I just want to bring into the conversation as well. And Donald Douglas is putting something out interesting there, which says people don't care hugely about sustainability. They want to shop in Shein, buy single-use vapes, and get money off and competitions. What do you say to that, Stefan, Marco?
Yeah, I'm not getting into the psychology and the fact that the picture we draw about ourselves isn't a picture that we truly are. And we all are designers of ourselves. So yes, people do, if you ask them on an open panel, they'll say, yes, of course I care. And then of course they act and behave differently. Because somehow we are conscious people, and then we're also animals. And these animals follow instincts, and these instincts are deeper, and they're not always controlled by our brain, which certainly has an agenda, but it doesn't always have control. So people do things which they're not supposed to do by their own account, by what they say themselves about themselves. And that's, of course, psychology. That's nothing new. This is marketing psychology. It's been all over the place for the last hundreds of years. And if you ask anybody how much money you're going to spend in Las Vegas, they say $100, and then of course they spend $1,000. And say, what, you lost count, or what happened? Yeah, well, it's the situation that changes things. And yes, in the end of the day, people may or may not consciously make that choice, that purchasing decision. They will buy emotionally, and they will be, however, believing that a certain brand portrays a better credibility than another one by the way they illustrate their values. And that is not because they made a thorough analysis. I mean, the consumer made a thorough analysis and came to a conclusion. Nobody's got time for that. They believe. People believe in brands. They believe in a value behind that brand. And it's a long journey for a brand to establish itself as a sustainable brand, for example. It can take years. But if that brand value is set, then it is because 1,000 pieces were done right. And in 1,000 elements of decisions and communication pieces, somehow it created a perception of that brand being more sustainable. And people make that choice subconsciously. But somehow, still, it was the result of an effort made, not just by accident, and not just because people spent 2 hours researching first before they make that purchase of that one single bottle of water, if that water company somehow has done a proper annual report on their sustainability. They're not going to do that. So yes, I believe it's correct. People still make choices that are not linear to what they say, and if you ask them openly, but still, they do make these choices based on some gut feeling, which is deeply rooted into a brand emotion. And still, through that, you can influence, and you can make people believe that what you're doing is the better thing.
I fully agree with you. I mean, we're not psychologists, but these comments reflect also the diversity that is outside. So there are different people who care, or say that do not care. People who care but act differently, and people who care and act accordingly. So these would definitely create 3 different segmentations of the consumer ecosystem and not actually 7 billion different consumers. So there is a new way to analyze this behavior that is providing new challenges on how I can actually avoid that level of customization that has growing in exponentially. I was mentioning before, if you go a grocery aisle in the US, you will be overwhelmed by the offer because they try to hit every single decision makers. I think we start to see some kind of polarization, as we said before. Those who do not care, who care but act differently, and those who care and do act. So in that sense, there is a possibility to respond also to those who care or do not care by providing information, education. So I don't believe that as Greta said, that humankind is evil. Definitely, people need to understand what is their contribution. They see that their contribution can actually improve the future of their families and their children, because everybody has a family in a certain way, but they do not know how to do it. And then when it's connected packaging providing, say, look, when you finished with the consumption of the product that you love, that's what you have to do in order to secure the circular economy, the protection of the environment, the social aspect also of the business, because create a circular economy, create also social wealth. So this equitable value creation that people would actually ignore because we are talking so much about greenhouse gas emission. Absolutely important, yes. Absolutely. But sustainability is more than just greenhouse gas emission reduction. And so providing something that is very close to people concerns, like my job, my future, it is something that is part of the sustainability narrative that often is not actually so much highlighted, except for the greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, I completely agree. And actually, sustainability actually encompasses doing the right thing. It's about doing the right thing as well, and that also includes people. That kind of leads into something that one of the audience members has kind of commented as well, which is saying, do you have examples where connected packaging actually makes the usage phase of the product better? It feels like we're mostly justifying a brand's ability to capture data, which has little to do with consumer centricity. I want to quickly remind, if anyone hadn't seen, one of the examples that we had earlier, which was an example of Bangor, where every consumer who played, the brand actually gave a donation to a company, which was a charity, which was a children's orphanage. So being able to use connected packaging for good, I think there's lots of examples. That's one of mine. I don't know whether Marco or Stefan, you have any other examples of connected packaging where it's not just about getting data, but it's actually about doing something good or educating in a good way.
Yeah, maybe not that I have a concrete example, but I would like to just chip in on what Marco was saying. Yes, we do change from a one-directional to a more or less bi-directional mode of interaction. Packaging was a broadcast mode. You put it on pack, you put it on shelf, and then you have that message spread over 100,000 packs that stand in different supermarket shelves, sending that same message. It's like watching TV. Now, all of a sudden, we are changing this watching TV mode into an interactive mode where people immediately respond, or can at least, to what I'm offering. So I'm engaging. And that is, of course, a bi-directional way. That's why we say we come from a one-directional to a bi-directional way. And that instant gratification thing also holds true for both sides. So it is also the brand owner who gets an instant reaction from whoever chooses to interact immediately, not 6 months later from a market research. How did my product actually, perform? How did people like it? But maybe you get this within an instance of a few seconds as a feedback. Now, that does mean customer centricity. It means that you get a possibility that consumers can actually feed something back, which otherwise half a year later they wouldn't even remember. If you'd ask them somewhere on the street, how did you remember that first time you saw that product or that pack and that design? Did that somehow convince you? You wouldn't remember, but the instant moment, that impulse is immediately available. Now that's available to the brand, and that's a trade-off. You get something, you return something. That's the whole concept of a social economy, where you interact, and we are not just static somewhere and you say, I am collecting, I'm asking somebody to collect the answer I've been looking for, because I invested $500,000 in a relaunch, and then half a year later somebody tells me, oh, it didn't work. Oh, really? So what did I do wrong? Well, we're investigating, but it's too late. So your immediate feedback is of value. It
Definitely.
does, I think, put customer centricity in a certain
Agreed.
light.
Yeah, market research. Find out what people think
it
of
is
your
market research on the go.
immediately.
And that's a value again that can only be delivered through engagement, through connected packaging.
Yeah.
And yes, of course, it's a trade-off. You give something, and in return you get something, and that goes for both sides.
Yeah, no, that connected packaging is, I have seen the development, the interest of retailer to start doing this. Some of the retailers that I serve through my engagement on sales on sustainability, I see some retailers start to put the QR code, but it's not actually a connected packaging in the sense that there is an exchange of information. It's still one-way communication, where they talk about how this packaging has come to life. But there is not the backwards communication. So they're closing the loop of information. But this is an attempt of retailer to engage in the consumer and validate their choices, because this is what consumer want, and say, give me the proof that I'm making a responsible choice. We talk about responsible production and responsible consumption, and only connected packaging could actually bring the two things together. And so putting the burden on the production to be responsible, I mean, eliminated waste, reducing the consumption of water, reduce the emissions, and any other sustainability dimensions that are actually critical for every business or every stakeholders, cannot actually complete it if we're not actually providing the information to validate the choice that we have done to be a responsible producer to connect with the responsible consumption. So if I care about water, but the packaging is wasted into the sea, as we all experience every day, there is something that we are not doing right. So because as a company, we are not actually taking care of the end of life. And the end of life is out of our control, is in the hand of consumers. And so that level of information is growing in terms of we start to learn how to do it. The next level would be, now let's have a bilateral communication where we're saying, okay, now that you trust us for what we're doing, okay, help me as a company, retailer, or consumer package producer, or packaging supplier, and saying, what do I need to do right in order to be more responsible in my business? And that is something that we see this is starting to grow into the awareness of brands and some of the retailer that I work with, and say, let's give a try. The level of confidence needs to be built by trial and error. That's natural. Nobody has a crystal ball to say this is the right actions to do, because there are so many consumers outside, and everybody has a different thought through process in order to make their own decision.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's the recognition that there has got to be an exchange. And I think that's what you said, Stefan, you get something for giving something, but also that it is a learning process as well. But also there is that sustainability part, and there's a lot of change coming in, and we've got some fantastic panelists talking about it later on, and 4:55 this afternoon, about kind of reusability as well. So actually that connected packaging can be enabled for you to be advised where to return your packaging and be rewarded for doing so. So there's a lot there in terms of being able to reuse the packaging. I think, Marco, you were talking about, what to do with my packaging after. Is it take it back? Is it recycle? Is it take it to this particular place and be rewarded for doing so? So I don't think that it's all about just giving the data over. I think it's about brands genuinely wanting to understand what their consumers want and genuinely trying to help them to change consumer behavior in order to be more sustainable, or to purchase their product and be part of a loyalty program or whatever that might be. I think that kind of answers some of that. There's another interesting comment actually from an attendee, and they say I'm interested in the panel's thoughts on the challenge at the point of sale with connected packaging. The prime purpose, they say, is increasing consumer engagement and increasing demand, with valid sustainability credentials, but nobody is scanning a product in the supermarket aisle? I've got an answer, but I'm going to hand to you guys. Marco, go for it.
Yeah, we have used to print on packaging, on the design of the brands, a lot of information. Now, it would be nice where the packaging is only the QR code and says scan me if you want to know more. We will never go to that extreme, but I think people will start to build a certain kind of sensitivity. What is greenwashing? And say doesn't sound right. So I think that there will be a moment where the layout of the packaging will go into the essentials of providing what the customer would like to know. Somebody will say nobody will scan. No, it's not true. I mean, there will be people who scan, people who scan occasionally, and there will be people who do not scan a QR code. But when one is scanning, is providing information, and through the social media or through the friends or through the family, this is a snowball effect. So we don't need everybody to scan. We need just one to scan, because those people will actually then be ambassador of their choices and say, hey, you know what I have learned is that these packaging and these products are coming from, and they're going into, and so on. So all the set of information. So yes, I think that that is where we see the trends moving into this, taking care of these generations, because these are the ambassador of change. I mean, it's impossible that a packaging industry or the brand will actually do the most of the information. These comes with the collaboration with the consumers.
Absolutely. Stefan, what do you think about, are people scanning in the aisles?
Well, they do occasionally, of course.
They do. Yeah,
there's not like, again, it's too, I mean, we're talking billions of people, so we cannot say there's this one single consumer and there's just a clone of that individual 7 billion times. Certainly not. But I would say, bear in mind that the moment of truth purchase on the shelf is not the only touch point. People take that product home. That product has a shelf life at home too. Okay, maybe not the chocolate bar that you buy on a gas station that has a very little shelf life. You probably consume it instantly and then you're done. And maybe
before I've left the petrol station.
That pack you find it 2 days later in your car. So, oh, all right, that was a weak moment. But
yes, that
gotcha. But then you have other products which sometimes, I just take toothpaste, right? You buy toothpaste. How many weeks is that toothpaste sitting in front of you as you go into your bathroom in the morning and looks at you as you look at it? Or well, you look at the mirror, you look at yourself, say awful, but no, well, let's do my part to get myself ready for work. But this toothpaste illustrates. It's a banner. It's a commercial banner in your bathroom, and it gets center stage, and that stays there. And the moment may be that not on the first moment when you buy it, but the day after, the week after, you do actually scan. It does happen that people do interact at a later stage because they still hold that product in their hands. The touch point continues. Not everything is instant consumption. So this is the moment that people then hope for. Secondly, the point of sale for some products moves into e-com. So that whole storytelling about, whether you scan products with your mobile phone, your smartphone in the supermarket shelf is not told anymore in that moment, because the whole purchase decision has been taken beforehand on interface that is not the physical pack. So again, then people get the product home, they get it shipped, or they pick it up somewhere in a brown box, and later on they unpack it, and then they start to get interested, because the kind of thing is, did I make that choice purposely, or did I just fall in for the wrong guy because it was an advertisement or whatever? People still think as they do, not just in that very second. It's an important second, the point of sale, but it's not the only one. And so I think this is important to keep in mind, that it's not just that one single second that it all, that all focuses on, but there is a longer life, not only talking about recyclable moments and how we dispose of the product later on, but even as we still have it in our own personal shelf at home.
Yeah, fully agree. Marco, what have you got to say about that? Some great points. What have you got anything to add?
Only one thing, the statement of Stefan, and say, I'm just thinking myself when I do breakfast sometimes, I'm eating my cereals and I start looking at my milk box or the cereal box and so on. And you start to scanning and then looking at it and say, what do they have to share with me? in order for me to go back and repurchase the same product. So it is true. The packaging, except for those who have an instant consumption, okay, is something that lives in my life daily, if not over a long period of time, because I keep buying. And so this engagement is not a one shot, is a shot that needs to be tailored in a smart way. The communication has to be simple. The insights must be relevant, as well also the information backwards. Tell me more about what you think about it. What is your feedback? What are your suggestions?
Yeah.
That is the pipeline of innovation that
absolutely.
everybody's looking for.
What flavor do you want next? Oh, watermelon toothpaste. Perfect. Everyone said that. What's next? Watermelon toothpaste.
Direct, simple communication, insightful content.
Yes.
Give me a judgment. Yes, no, I like it, I don't like it.
Yeah.
Give me a feedback. Send me questions, send me suggestions.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I do just want to mention about people scanning in the aisle, though. There are groups of consumers that will scan in the aisle, and those are groups that might not think of, but people such as dietary requirements. Does this have gluten or not, for example? Is this halal or not? There is also a fantastic session later on, which we've got with Steve talking about NaviLens, which is for blind people. So those who can't actually read the packaging, or I should say visually impaired, it's not just for those who are blind. So there is a segment of people who will use the packaging for another reason as well. So I think that's important to mention. But you know, all of the other examples are super, super relevant as well. And talking about the fact that the packaging is going to have to do a lot more work if this has been bought in an e-com environment, super interesting as well. You know, there's a lot of great conversation here. I just want to mention some of the other comments because we've got so much comments going on. I love it. Thank you so much. The audience is super on it. Consumer buying habits are influenced by Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Of course, that's a comment in from Joanna, and I think we would agree with that. Of course, the buying habits, our needs are all different depending on who we are, again, and the segment that we belong to. Radag says collection information seems the holy grail, but if you consider health and a good life as target, do you guys think that Steve Jobs of the iPhone did something good for the user, or has he ruined our lives?
Oh my God, gets very philosophical now. Has Steve Jobs ruined our lives? Who am I to judge that? Anyway, it wouldn't be him, maybe some other guy, maybe it would have taken a different shape, but the demand, you can't. I had another quote which said, I can't remember exactly, but it said, you can't beat the future always wins. It's impossible. You cannot stem against that. And I think what shape the future takes certainly is influenced by individuals who are at the right spot at the right time. They make product choices, they make decisions, which then it takes the shape of an iPhone, which somehow defines a whole generation and defines a lot of things in a very different way. And yes, it's the next chapter break coming up with new tools or with new platforms, whatever, taking, you know, that role as a game changer. I just think it's secondary to what shape exactly it is and who was the guy. It was Steve in that moment. Maybe Steve, born 10 years earlier, would have been a person nobody talks about because he would have been in the wrong time, in the wrong country. And I mean, you know all this story. So somebody would have done something like that. And therefore, let's not personalize this. I think in the end, it is how things develop, and it is the human mankind that makes these developments possible because we are not happy with what we got. We just don't stop. So that's why it will be a different future for sure. It's not something we can put the freeze button and say, okay, now it's fine. Let's just freeze it all like it is. It's fine for me. So the rest of the world, please freeze too, because there's some people out there, they're not fine with the situation. And so the comfort zone that some people, you know, are frustrated about leaving, because that's all the rules we've now mastered. That's a little bit of complacency, I think, to say people are happy with what they've got, but disregard that other people don't have much and don't have much share of it. And then, you know, for me, it's fine, but it's not for others. So there will be change, and there will be new technologies, and there will be new ways of interacting.
Exactly. We don't have to look at AI and be like, well, we don't.
Exactly. Chapter break next.
Right. We only have to mention that. I want to quickly keep moving because we've only got a couple of seconds left, really. Some really good comments about data sharing. Big retailers have the majority of consumer data. So again, connected packaging, of course, can help us to be able to get some of that data that the retailers don't want to share. That was from Mark Bourne. So thanks for that, Mark. Chloe talks about connected packaging being used to educate the consumer in store to remove barriers, and therefore, of course, will increase the sales in store, which I think is really interesting. You know, we could talk for such a long time, but we've kind of reached the end. I really want to just maybe ask if both of you maybe just have a sentence or something that you want to leave the audience with, something about the future, what you think is happening, or what you're most excited about. I don't know if there's one particular thing that kind of comes into mind. Whoever has an idea first can jump in.
Just that one thought. I think there was also a comment saying that people are not willing to put more money into, you know, the product when they buy it, just because we have a promise that somehow there's a higher sustainability promise, etc., etc. And I think that's somehow true, because if you pay more, you want to get more value for it. Now, a commodity product, take something simple like a liter of milk. It's extremely difficult by your senses, by your eyes, whatever, to distinguish the 1 liter that goes for 80 cents versus the other one that goes for 2 euros. What's the difference? Okay, the packaging tries to tell me that difference, why I should be buying this one that's double the price. And by putting some illustration on and some claims and some marks and whatever, I will probably buy the story. But it comes to a point where this is not going to be enough anymore to convince me to make a purchase decision of a value that probably gives even a vendor a higher margin, and of course gives me a higher value, because truly there's something more behind this story that the label of that pack just cannot tell. It's not enough real estate to tell this full story. So the connected packaging is the way to then give people that confirmation, the consumer the confirmation that there is a story behind this, not just a claim. And to give that depth, the channel of that depth is the only way that people can justify to themselves why I pay twice the price for a product, why I accept even a higher, expense on my side, because I get something in return. I want to get a backup of that. And if I don't have connected packaging into something else, giving that whole space to talk why I think it's worth 2 euros, I'm going to have a very hard time just to put an ecological label on it and a sustainability label on it and something else, and that should do the trick. We know that people are not buying into this, most of them not, because they say that's too much greenwashing going on. I don't buy just labels, I want to know more. At least
use the connected packaging to tell your story. Is that your one sentence, Stefan?
Exactly. Get out of the limitation and tell more, because there is more. We have more to tell.
I've got to move to Marco. Marco, one sentence which I can translate and formulate.
I can only add on Stefan and say, apply your critical thinking. I mean, it's an exercise that we do daily in every choice we do. But raise the voice, use the channels that you have. If connected packaging is not there yet, use the social media to say, raise the question and say, tell me a little bit, because I'm not convinced yet. That message is so powerful that everybody will start thinking, everybody, I mean, the brand, the retailer, the packaging industry, and so on. So use your critical thinking in a constructive way and share your thoughts. And share the thoughts in whatever channel is possible. That will definitely create that future that we're all looking for, and say in which direction is moving actually the whole consumerism that is outside and is growing. And it's growing because we are going to be soon 10 billion people. So can you imagine what does it mean this? We need to manage that information flow. And this is part of our duty. Me as a consumer as well. Apply critical thinking. I'm doing the right choice here. I mean, where is this product coming from?
Yeah, exactly.
With what is made? How can I separate a single part in order to make it actually a sustainable end of life? So that's are the questions that anybody should actually have, and pose it out and say, tell me more. And then we will shape the economy in a direction that we want.
Perfect. So think about that space, use that space. It's all about connected packaging.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you so much, Marco. Thank you, Stefan. I could actually spend another hour with you, but we can't do that, because coming up next, we actually have Alice and Jorg, and they're going to be talking to us about some fantastic elements around unlocking sustainability. So thank you very much to you guys, and I will see everyone else very shortly. Don't go away.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.